So welcome to another edition of the live Ask an Investigator video series. Got a couple questions in our queue today. If you have additional questions, go ahead and either email them to our help desk, help@activeintel, or you can type them into the chat box. I'll start out with a few of our existing questions. First thing we're going to talk about is how to do your own investigation, and then maybe even how to use it in a legal process. We're also going to talk about how to look up information on non-deeded real estate, like a trailer or mobile home. Those are a couple things that are in our queue. Get started with that momentarily. So the first subject we're going to talk about, it's very common, people want to know, is how do you run your own investigation? How can you do your own fraud investigation, background check? And the most common type of investigation is an asset search. So let's say you have a judgment against a third party. You maybe have a lawsuit against a party you need to do research on. How do you do your own investigation? Well, almost all of the records and data and the type of research that an investigator can do, private citizen can do yourself. Most of the cost that goes into an investigation is labor, right? It's the investigator's time doing the research, analysis, forensics. So the first step is going to be researching the records, researching the data. And Shannon, I see your message, your question. We'll get to that one momentarily. And when you do an investigation, the first step is going to be figuring out where the data is going to come from, right? If it's real estate records, it comes from the recorder of deeds. If it's vehicle records, that's going to come from the DMV. If it's banking records, bank account searches, that's going to come from the banking system. In some cases, records may come from government sources, court records, arrest records, police records. Sometimes assets come from UCC filings. Once you've compiled and obtained all of those documents, the next thing you're going to do is do forensics on the documents. You're going to look at all these papers, and you're going to see what are the recorded data, names, addresses, emails, phone numbers, and you're going to put those into a matrix. And once you've collected all that information, you're going to create an investigative report. What are the conclusions that are drawn from that? And remember, especially with the investigative part and also with what we're going to talk about with court cases, we're not attorneys. We're not here to give you legal advice, and you probably want to get legal advice from an attorney before you take any action. But the next step is, if you were going to use this information in court, how is that going to be presented in court? If you are doing your own case, pro se, the hardest part about representing yourself in court is how to file the document, how to file a complaint, a writ of garnishment, what's the format. And remember, we're not giving you legal advice. We're also not even telling you that you shouldn't get legal advice. Many of these things you want to get legal advice from an attorney to make sure your rights are protected, that you're not going to lose out on rights or even create liability for yourself. However, if you do decide you want to go forward in court on your own without an attorney, the question comes up is, how do you file a motion with the court or a complaint or start a lawsuit? Most other government agencies, the DMV, property records, there's a form you fill out. It's a blank form where you have a place for a name, a place for an address, a place for VIN number for a vehicle, whatever the case might be. And it's easy to file. With a court case, there are no blank forms. Sometimes a small claims department might have a form you can start the case with, but most court cases require that you start with a blank sheet of paper and you type up what's called a complaint, or if it's for asset garnishment, a writ of garnishment. There's not a blank form to fill out for that. It has to go in a certain format for that jurisdiction. Every county is different in the jurisdiction, how they require the complaint to be filed. For example, one county might require double spaced, one might be single spaced, one might have the plaintiff on top and the defendant below, might be side to side. The best way to start coming up with a format is to look at existing formats of other cases. So if, let's say you're in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, and you want to know what the format is for that county, what you can do is find prior cases in that county that have been filed and see what the format is. Now, be aware that that case might be different than yours. It might be a different type of case. It might be a different set of circumstances, but at least you'll know the format of how the cases are filed in that jurisdiction. You can use that as a template, put your own case information on there. At least you have something you can bring to the court. What we find with courts is if you bring your own information and at least have a first attempt at filing that case, the court might be able to nudge you a little bit in the right direction to tell you how to fix your filing. If you go in with a blank sheet of paper or no paper and say, I want to file a case, they're not allowed by law to help you, give you legal advice, or tell you how to file a case. But if you go in with at least something in your hands, they can at least nudge you in the right direction. Again, remember, we're not attorneys. We're not giving you legal advice. You might want to get an attorney to do this. But if you go in at least with something typed up, the court can sometimes help you. The format of the complaint is important. So we're going to get to Shannon's question about what's the next step after making an IC3 complaint. So an IC3 is an internet crime complaint. The IC3 Center is part of the FBI, and it's for internet scams and internet crimes. You see many videos we've done on internet scams, internet crimes, and this is a place to file those types of complaints with the FBI. What you'll find is once that is submitted, the IC3 complaint, it'll go into a system where the government will compare this with other complaints to see if there's a trend or a pattern. Is it a case they're already working on? Many of these cases that you send in, they already have a file opened for the defendant or this company or this fraudster. Many of these online scams have to do with cryptocurrency scams or Ponzi schemes or online scams to take your money. And they're working on a number of these cases already. So when you put in your case, you may find that they already have a file open for this case, already working on it. Your information will help them pursue this case farther. It'll give them another point of triangulation, maybe other email addresses, maybe other phone numbers. They may contact you to get access to these fraudsters. In some cases, the first victims have already told the fraudsters that they have caught on to their scam. For example, if the fraudster is scamming Joe Schmo and Joe Schmo says, you're scamming me, give me my money, and they make complaints, well, the scammer could block them. Don't take their calls. Don't answer their emails. Block their text. So if you are a newer victim and you haven't yet blown up on the fraudster, sometimes the IC3 or FBI, whoever it's assigned to, maybe local law enforcement, can use your contact to still maintain communications with this scammer. That may happen. Now, what do you do next as a victim? Depending on the nature of how you were defrauded, what you might want to do is next start your own investigation. Start researching who these people are, who the identities of the scammers are. Maybe find out where their assets are being held. The first thing you want to do is make sure you're not losing any more money. If you've been a victim of any kind of identity theft or personal threats or risk of injury, you want to make sure you protect yourself. Put a freeze on your credit report. Maybe call your local police. Maybe defend yourself from further hacking. If your computer's being hacked, you want to put, protection software in your computer. Depending on the nature of the attack, the first thing you want to do is end any potential future threats or liability. If you feel there might be legal jeopardy involved, you want to make sure that you get good legal advice. Make sure you're not going to be exposed to any liability. Make sure you're not part of the fraud, even accidentally. If you have any records of money being sent other places, wire transfers, Western Union, sometimes these fraudsters will make you send them Walmart gift cards, or make them access to your login for your Bitcoin. Make sure you shut all that down. If you can get access to where the money went to, or if you sent gift cards, access to the activity, that might be evidence that you have for your investigation. That's the first step. Protect yourself first, then start an investigation, and then maybe look to see where you can recover your assets from. So that's a very good question, Shannon. That comes up a lot, and that IC3 is an excellent resource that people can use to report crimes that have to do with the internet. Next question we have from anonymous user is Spyglass's camera. So there's a lot of ways that you can make observation covertly for activity, to document things, to document evidence. There are a number of companies that provide these. Couple things to keep in mind. Number one, make sure you're aware of the laws in your jurisdiction of this type of recording. Some states and counties, in our last video we covered this, have specific laws against recording other people in places where they have an expectation of privacy. Look, you can't walk into a gym locker room and start recording people changing. You can't record people, let's say, in a private area in their bedroom or something else without their permission. In many cases, even in a public area, you may not be allowed to record audio. So if the glasses or camera that you're using is recording audio, you may have to defeat that audio by disabling the audio component of that camera. Whatever format you're using, make sure that it's recording at the high enough resolution that you can use it. If you're going to record something 50 feet away, 1080p is probably not going to be high enough resolution to get good detail. If you need to record license plates, you got to make sure that you're close enough with high enough resolution to record the digits of that license plate. If you want to make sure you're identifying a person's face, you want to make sure you have higher resolution, maybe 4K at a certain distance. Good way to do this is to use even something that you already have, your camera's phone, maybe an existing separate digital camera that you have. Mark down and make note of what the resolution is. Is it 1080p? Is it 720? Is it 4K? And take video test shots and image test shots, still image, at certain distances to see first what resolution you need. If you have a 4K camera, that's good because you can downscale the resolution of that camera. So let's say you think you're going to be doing investigation surveillance at, let's say, 50 meters, and you have a 4K camera. Well, take some resolution shots at 4K at that 50 meters, save that. Downscale your camera to, let's say, 1080. Take some resolution shots at 1080. Downscale it to 720, take some resolution shots at 720. And then look at those shots to see, did you get the detail you needed? Did you get the recognition of license plates, facial recognition? Were you able to read what you need to read or identify people? Then you can use that test to determine what type of camera you may need. Now, as far as Spyglass's camera, that's going to be determined by what's your strategic scenario. Do you have to appear to be perfectly covert, where you're just walking around without a camera that you're holding in your hand or using your phone? In that case, you might use glasses. It doesn't have to be eyeglasses. It could be a pen. There are pens that you can put in your pocket that will record at close distances. It may be what we call a sticky cam, where it's actually a camera device, right? That is the size of maybe something like this, right? That you can stick or affix to a location that you know you want to record, and then come back to later. Some of them connect by Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, where you can just leave it there and download the images. You want to make sure you have sufficient capacity to record what you need to record. You also want to consider power. A lot of these cameras can run for a long time on batteries, but if you're going to be away from it for 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is, you may need to repower it or charge it up or have fixed power going to it. If it's something you want to have mobile for dynamic surveillance where you're going to be moving around, glasses can work. But a lot of times the glasses that have cameras in them don't look realistic, where if somebody's paying any kind of attention, they're going to know that those glasses are not real. They look good, on a picture or when you're ordering them on Amazon, but they might not be realistic up close. And most of the glasses that we've seen, you have to be close enough to get good images to where somebody's going to pick up on it that it's not for real, right? So we recommend using another source. There's a lot of cameras that are on a wire. For example, the camera itself is something like the size of an earbud, right? Or the lens itself is the size of an earbud. It's got a wire that goes down to a camera where you can put that camera on a lapel, on a button, on a zipper, and then have the wire go down to the actual camera and to the battery that you have in your pocket or on your belt. Those are much better because you can have a larger camera device and larger battery capacity, but still have a small camera that's covert that you pin on something. You can even pin it behind a piece of see-through cloth. A lot of these cameras, if you have muslin or gauze or something that is relatively see-through, you can shoot through that and still get good resolution. So first consider your distance. You want to do some sight lines and some scouting of what distances you think you're going to be from the person. And then you want to match your camera device to that distance and then match it to your use case. Are you going to be mobile? Are you going to be in a vehicle? Are you going to be walking? Are you going to be sitting in a restaurant? And also very carefully consider your jurisdictional laws. Can you record audio? Are there any places where this video is not going to be allowed? Because what we found is in cases where these videos have been used, it's not enough that you deleted the audio later. It's not enough that you blocked out the sensitive data later. You have to not record it in the first place. So again, it may be a scenario where you want to get good legal advice from an attorney or do your own research of the laws and understand them before you start doing that kind of surveillance. Because if you do it the wrong way, not only can it be maybe excluded from use in a legal setting, you also can have liability from using it. So that's a very good question. Another question we have by email has to do with looking up ownership of a non-deeded type of property. And this is specifically related to mobile homes and trailers. So in many cases, a mobile home or a trailer is a piece of property that's on rented land, right? So in a mobile home park or a trailer park, unit number 22A might be a 50 by 20 trailer or mobile home, but it's actually on rented land. And the person who's living there rents the land from the park. They may own the trailer, but they rent the land from the park. So how do you determine the ownership of that parcel? Well, the first thing you want to do is look at the real estate deeds for the actual land underneath it. Even though the person may not own it, their name might be on the tax records because they might be paying the property tax, right? The next thing you want to do is look to see if there's a decal on the actual trailer, because in many states, the trailer is considered a vehicle and it's registered the same way that a vehicle is. It may not have a license plate, but it probably has a registration record at the DMV that you can request using a DPPA form. The other way you can determine the residence or ownership of that trailer or the mobile home is by utility records. In many cases, the water, sewer, electric, even phone or cable have utility accounts with the municipality or private sector cable company, municipal utility company that goes with the resident or owner of that trailer. And that's something that you can look up or request. The easiest way to do it would be to try to get the information from the operator of that park, right? So if the mobile home park has a management company or rental company, that company has the record of who's paying them rent for that lot. And sometimes you can request that from that operator. If it's a court case, you can do a subpoena. If it's something that's civil that you just need to request, certain types of social engineering can be used to request that from them. In some cases, you can present yourself as a potential renter and you want to know who the other tenants are. In some cases, you can do even a back search on addresses using public records to find out who is the resident or possible owner of that parcel. Another question we have by email has to do with, see if the best way to describe this is a long email. If a person has an obligation to pay for repairs, how do you claim a lien against their asset? For example, if somebody brings you a vehicle to fix, or you work on their house and you're a contractor, or presumably if you do labor for that person and they don't pay. Well, the question has its answer built in. Each one of those scenarios has a legal obligation for payment to the provider of the goods or services. For real estate, for example, if you provide labor or even materials to a piece of property, in most states, you automatically have a mechanic's lien or a contractor's lien on that property until it's paid. Now, there may be some requirements, and you might want to get legal advice on this. You might have to be a licensed contractor in order to enforce this. You might have to have a signed contract in order to enforce it. The lien might be subject to the bank lien, like the mortgage. You might be in second position. But those are the protections afforded to contractors on real estate in most states. For a vehicle, if you are a body shop or repair garage and somebody brings your car in for service and they don't pay their bill, again, you can do a garage holder's lien or mechanic's lien on the vehicle to hold that vehicle or even seize it as ownership if you are a provider of labor or parts for that vehicle. Again, in some states it requires you have a license, in some states it doesn't. In the state of Texas, you don't need a license to be a repair shop. So you have to go through a certain process of filing the lien, notifying the owner, notifying lien holder, notifying any other interested party. Sometimes you have to put an ad in the newspaper declaring that you are an authorized person. The last one has to do with general labor. Sometimes that falls under the category of labor laws. If you are an employee, you're required to do that. So you have another question about tracing. And this is from Liana, and won't get into too many details because this is a private information. But yeah, so in your case, we did receive your emails, and there are methods to trace that. One of the things that we tried to do is have our digital forensics department contact you. Normally they do that by phone, and I don't know if they were able to reach you or not. It's a little more complicated than can be described in email. The email didn't have a phone number in it. So if you want to email back with a phone number that our digital forensics department can contact you, we can trace those. And just so that everybody knows, these tracings that somebody wants to do are tracing somebody who is impersonating them, right? They've hacked their phone, they've taken over their mobile devices. It looks like they've also taken over their social media, and this person has evidence where they can see somebody else is logging into their devices. You've all seen on your mobile devices, it says a log in from this location. So for example, if I'm on my computer and I log in on my phone, my computer might give me a notice, hey, somebody's logging in from this phone and this email and this location. That's good. That's security. And this person is seeing other logins where other devices are using their account. So yeah, if Liana, if you have a phone number where you can be reached by our digital forensics department, we can have somebody contact you about how that back tracing can be done. And presumably, we tried to look up some numbers for you to contact you, and I don't know if they got through or not, but that would be the next step. Another question we have is, how do you backtrace spam calls, right? This is a very interesting question. There was an article, I'm going to see if I can find it, in the news just yesterday or the day before. See if we can find it. It was in USA Today. Where there was like 2 or 3 billion spam calls made. So there was a discovery from a couple of the cell companies, AT&T, and I believe the other was US Cellular, where there was a barrage of phone calls. Some people were getting 40, 50 calls a day from spam companies. And this is increasing. These spam calls are on the rise. So how do you find out who it is? Well, the first thing you want to do is don't block the numbers right away, because once you block it, then you won't see where they're coming in. The next thing you want to do is to write down the caller ID, obviously, of the calls, because sometimes if it turns into spam later, it'll delete from your call record. Some of the cell phone providers, AT&T is a good example. If they recognize a outgoing number is a source of spam, they'll block it and they'll take it off your call list. They think you're helping you out, and they may be, but it's not going to help you investigate that. First thing you want to do is do a back search on that phone number. There's ways you can do a trace route on the phone number. You can even do a Google search for the number. And what you'll find is you will find reports where other people have gotten calls from that number, and it'll describe what the nature of the call was. So you may find that this call comes from a company trying to sell you extended warranty on your car, maybe trying to sell you health insurance. Maybe they're trying to sell you some type of an investment. And you'll see overall where that number was registered to and who was using it in the past. If for some reason there's no reports on it, you can do a reverse phone lookup, and it'll attach any phone number to who the underlying user of that is. The other place that sometimes you'll find this is in social media. Many times these companies that are trying to sell something will post their number on their social media platforms. And the reason they do that is because it helps their search engine optimization. It gives them higher rankings on search engines. It also will, in their mind, try to get more of the phone calls to go through, because sometimes the cell phone networks, AT&T, Verizon, they will look to block numbers that are notorious for spam. But if they see these numbers on an official registration of a company, whether it's on their Secretary of State records or social media, sometimes that'll lower the ranking of spam, so more calls will get through. And the cell phone companies, they want to try to block these calls, because the more calls that are clogging up their network, the less actual calls get through. So the cell phone companies are actively trying to block calls. So if you want to investigate it and find out who's behind it, you want to make sure that you try to keep the calls from getting blocked until you've done with your investigation. Then you can block it manually. There are also certain registries A lot of these calls go through a VoIP system or VoIP type system, which is voice over internet protocol. So the phone calls are not going through the phone network; they're going through the internet, and then at the last minute they go into the phone network. And these VoIP providers, you've seen them, companies like Vonage or Click to Call or some of the other call providers. They have registries of these phone numbers of what IP addresses they're assigned to. So that may be another way you can search and find out, backtrace the IP to the actual server where it's coming from. So that's a very good question. So excellent. So it was a good batch of questions. Remember, during the intermediate time during the week, if you have other questions that come up, you can email our help desk, help@activeintel.com. Make sure and click the subscribe button so you get notifications when the next video is going to come up. That way you can attend and watch it in real time. If you're watching a recorded version, we appreciate it, but subscribe and you'll get notice when the next live version will come up. If you'd like to arrange a consultation with an investigator, you'll see our teleclient address on the screen. You can arrange for a video one-on-one consultation with a licensed private investigator to go over your case. Or if you have any questions, again, you can email our help desk or call us at our number you'll see on our website. Thanks again for the great questions, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Probably middle of next week we'll have our next live video, but again, subscribe and get notifications so you know when it pops up. See you guys later.